I'm Nora Morgan, but I was Nora Allen, and I was born in a little cottage in Newton Purcell in 1928, and I have three brothers, older than myself. When they were harvesting, this would be the afternoons, because the women, of course, and the children didn't go anywhere near in the mornings. But in the afternoons they would go out and take the food for the men, probably. They'd have cold tea in bottles and this sort of thing. It was quite primitive in a way. And they would sit down for about 20 minutes or so and have something to eat, and then they would go on with their harvesting. I can remember that people used, when I was a child, used to go into the harvest field when they were about, it was about 7 o'clock in the evening or 6 o'clock, and they would be harvesting, and the men would take their guns or their dogs, and the children would go up too, and then when they got near to the finish of the field, whichever it was, there would be rabbits running everywhere, and the kids would be tearing after these rabbits with sticks, and the men would be running about with guns. I can remember one man, he was forever doing this with his shotgun, and we were all terrified he was going to get shot. But he was quite a good shot, actually. In the particular farm I'm thinking of, nearly every time when they were going round, because they used to go round and round and round until they got to the end, the machine would break down. So this man, who was very good with his gun, was one of the men in the village, and he had been a blacksmith at one time when he was a younger man, and it was he who got his sleeves rolled up and was having a go at mending it, you know, so it would be reasonably mended, and then off the thing would go again, and the field would be finished, rabbits would be running everywhere, and people would be watching. I remember one lady who was in the village because her husband had been in the service, I think, and she was renting a property in the village, and she said, "Can you wonder that children get wild?" Because they were all rushing about carrying sticks, you see, to catch these rabbits, and it didn't matter what happened to the rabbit. I mean, they just clouted it because it was running. I don't know how they did it, but I mean, we were all the same. We all did the same sort of thing. I can remember an little evacuee boy. He was the youngest of a family of several, and his mother had brought him to the field with somebody in the village. And he didn't want to step too far because he said, "Mummy, Fizzle's here!" I can remember him very clearly. Certain of the evacuees' parents came, because if a child was under the age of 5, then the parent was allowed to come with it. So there were some parents and children, and the over 5s had to come by themselves. But there was one unfortunate little girl who came to the village, and when it transpired she was only 3, and what her mother had done was to shove her on the bus when everybody else was coming, you see, and left her there. And after the war they had the greatest difficulty in finding the mother. But she did eventually get there.
Yeah.
But really, lots of those children had a very different life here from when. But the unfortunate thing was that, you see, you might get a brother in this family, and he was with another boy, and then a sister in this family with another boy. They didn't put the families together because they didn't put boys and girls in the same homes. And of course, the billeting officer would go round beforehand and see how many spare rooms you had, and it didn't matter whether you said, "I can't take one." If you'd got a spare bedroom, then you had either 1 or 2 according to the size of your bedroom. When war was declared, we had a busload of evacuees. I can remember them coming, and as children we all went up to the school to peer in the window to see them, you see, and I can remember one kid putting his head up and going to us because we were all gazing, and the children were collected in the school, and there were certain ladies, I suppose it was a committee, I don't know, And then there was somebody came out with 2 little girls with a case, and you see they were allowed to carry 1 suitcase with them. And these 2 children came out, and there were parents there as well, waiting because they knew they had to have children within their homes. And somebody said, I know, I bet that one's going to schoolhouse. Oh no, she said, no it isn't, and off she walked, and I know where the child went, 2 children went eventually, but there was great jealousy, you see, because some children looked much smarter and cleaner than others. But it was really quite difficult because some of them were only 5, and they, of course, a 5-year-old doesn't understand. And we know far more about children nowadays than they seem to then. And of course the people in the villages, some of them were older ladies too, white-haired ladies who had to take children in. Because if they'd got a spare bedroom, that was it. You didn't have any choice.
And do you remember blackouts and things like that?
Oh Lord, yes, I do. Oh yes. We had to have blackouts before the war started. We had to make sure that they were all there before the war began, so that you could put them down as soon as they came in, and the wardens would come and knock on the door and say, there's light showing down the side of your window or whatever. And they'd actually dropped 2 bombs in Fringford, you know.
Oh.
No, you didn't know that, did you? Well, I didn't know there were bombs at Chesterton and places like that because we never knew, but there were 2 in Fringford that were dropped across a field down towards the allotment on the Waterloo Road. And one day, when I got up, Mum said, oh, there are 2 bombs being dropped in the village. One's exploded, but the other one hasn't gone off. And Uncle was very concerned about this, and so he said to the warden who came round to tell him, he said, well, where is this bomb then that hasn't gone off? Oh, I can't tell you that, he said. Uncle said, well, that's a lot of use, we might go across and come across it. But anyway, it was, of course, within a few days they'd discovered where it was. The local people weren't going to be had. They were finding out, weren't they? So, it was a Sunday evening, and they said, oh, they're going to let it off tomorrow. So, of course, in Shoals, the people from Fringford all went to look at this bomb, so I can remember seeing it. It was stuck in the ground, and there was a great, I suppose a square cavity dug into the ground, about 8 or 9 feet square, all round it, and this bomb was in it. And everybody was walking around and having a look. Well, it could have blown us all to kingdom come, but nobody thought about that. They just wanted to see this bomb. So the people went up there in dozens and dozens, and then they walked away. And of course, the one that had exploded had exploded beforehand, had thrown debris all over the place. So there were some youngsters who were collecting up the rubbish, you know, bits of metal, and putting it inside their jackets and taking it home and all this, as if it was something marvellous to have. Well, I suppose it was to children round here, because there wasn't anything very much, you see. But and then on the day they were going to explode it, they asked everybody in the village to open their windows, so that when the bomb exploded, there wouldn't be any cracked windows. And when we came here in 1963 or 4, there was a great big crack all down that window, because, as you know, the nuns were here during the war, and they must have forgotten to open that window, and it all cracked. So we had it redone, but oh, the excitement of the war, it was quite different. But I don't know what happened in other places, because we weren't told, you see. They wouldn't tell you anything. You never knew unless a warden came round and said, such and such has happened. I mean, it was only since the war that I've read in the newspaper that there were bombs that had dropped in Bignell Park and places like that. Well, that's no distance, is it? It's only very near. But you see, we weren't told anything. There was a tremendous hoo-ha, I remember, during the war. because one of the evacuee women went with her husband to the pub, and they thought that was disgusting. Because, oh, she's going up there and listening to all that silly talk and those men using bad language and swearing and oh, how dreadful. And you'd never, because they'd never seen a woman go to the pub before.